Scary facts that will make your skin crawl. There are countless stories and legends about scary ghosts, but here's a short fact that might send a chill down your spine. According to Japanese folklore, there is a vengeful ghost known as Onryo that is said to be created when a person dies with a deep and burning grudge. Onryo ghosts are known to haunt and torment the living, and are often depicted as having long, disheveled hair and white burial clothes. Some famous examples of Onryo ghosts in popular culture include the ghosts from the movies The Grudge and The Ring.
In this video, a creature breaks out of your screen to eat you. Face call, please. Video call? Incoming video chat request. Hello?
What do you want? What do you want?
It's talking.
Please go away. Go.
It's trying to break out. Its hands are like needles or something. You could stay right there. You don't have to come any closer. The body appeared untouched.
There was a girl who couldn't leave her room every October 10th of the year.
Why October 10th?
And this is why. So the mom, whenever the date came, she would mark it on the calendar. She would circle it, she would highlight it, make sure that her kid was in her room with no windows and stuff.
Yeah.
Right? She never told her kid why. And whenever she had school on that day, or if she had to do something else that day, she's like, nope, you're not allowed to leave the house. So every year on October 10th, they would lock themselves in a room with no windows, right? Every year, fam, you would hear someone ring the doorbell on the house. But the mom obviously is with the child. So she's like, no, we're staying in this room, we're staying in this room, right? She told her kid, like, please do not ever do this. And as soon as midnight hits and October 11th comes, the knocking, the ringing of the doorbell disappears.
But why that day? Like what?
It's building up, it's building up. So one day, her mom had to go on like a work trip.
Yeah.
And the kid already knew, October 10th, I'm gonna lock myself in that room and not do anything.
She knows the drill.
She knows the drill already.
This is the scary story about the peephole. A 15-year-old girl named Donna lived with her father in a very small house. Ever since her mother died, Donna had depended on her dad for everything. One morning, Donna's father was leaving for a business trip. He then told her that he won't be back until later that night, and with that, he kissed Donna on the forehead and left. Later that day, when Donna came home from school, she did some homework and watched TV. The clock then struck midnight, and she noticed her father still wasn't back, so she decided to go to bed. That night, Donna had a dream. She found herself standing on the edge of a busy highway. She then looked across the highway and saw a familiar figure standing there. It was her father, and his hands were cupped around his mouth trying to yell something. But Donna couldn't make out what he was saying. She noticed her father's eyes were very sad, and he seemed to be desperately trying to communicate with her. She could barely make out the words he was saying, but it sounded like "don't open the door." Suddenly, Donna woke up to a tapping noise. Then somebody rang the doorbell. Donna then scrambled out of bed, got dressed, and ran down to the front door. Looking through the peephole, she saw her father's face outside. He was staring right at her, and the doorbell was still ringing. "Okay, hold on, I'm coming," she shouted. She pulled back the deadbolt and was about to unlatch the door when she stopped. She then looked through the peephole again, and she noticed there was something off about her father's expression. His eyes were wide open, and he looked terrified. She then slid the deadbolt back into place. "Dad, did you forget your keys?" Donna yelled. The doorbell just kept ringing. "Dad, answer me." Still, the doorbell continued to ring. "Dad, please, I need you to answer me. Is there someone else out there with you?" Still, the doorknob continued to ring. She then yelled at the top of her lungs, "I'm not opening the door until you answer me." The doorbell kept ringing and ringing, but for some reason, her father refused to answer her desperate cries. For the rest of the night, Donna sat in the corner next to the door, crying and helplessly listening to the doorbell ringing over and over again. She then eventually fell asleep. In the morning when she woke up, she noticed it was very quiet. She then got up and went over to the peephole and looked inside. Her father was still there, just staring at her. She then cautiously opened the door and was confronted with a sight that filled her with unimaginable horror. Her father's severed head was hanging from a nail above the door, and there was a note attached to the doorbell. In weird sloppy handwriting, it read, "Clever girl."
True and terrifying Snapchat stories, Part 1. Everyone uses Snapchat, including the very weird kids at school. One day, Sam got an ad from someone on Snapchat named Zach Meister. Zach would always eat lunch by himself, and when people were around him, they would get a really weird vibe. Sam decided to add Zach back on Snapchat, and that's where it all went downhill. Right away, Zach sent 3 Snapchats to Sam. To show that she wasn't interested, Sam left Zach on delivered for 3 hours. Finally, when Sam opened the Snapchats, all 3 of them were pictures of her in the lunchroom captioned "You're cute." It was already nighttime and Sam was just gonna deal with it in the morning. Zach snapped Sam again, but this time she accidentally opened it right away. Zach asked if she lived on Main Street, and that's exactly where she lived. Like for part 2.
Scary Reddit Stories Part 74. I have a friend who is a trail ranger. Basically a ranger who can't get you in trouble. He told me about this time he was gathering illegally placed wildlife cameras and knocking down hunting stands with another actual ranger. The other ranger wasn't feeling well, so he said he was going to head back as it's a 1-hour ATV ride. Friend finished up the last one when he heard voices. Keep in mind he's far off the beaten path. He called out and no one replied. It was getting dark, so he started to head back and found out that his ATV wouldn't start. He then noticed that the battery was not connected anymore. He reconnected it and started to drive, but it wasn't going fast at all. Less than half a mile later the whole thing died. He radioed back basically saying, "Hey guys, I need someone to come pick me up." They told him yes, but it would take an hour. He asked if the other guy got back, and they said no. He settled down and started a small fire, but it didn't take long before he heard voices again. It's now dark, and the voices are creeping him out. It sounds like an argument, like someone was angry and yelling at someone else who sounded more scared. He called out and asked if anyone needed help. The voices didn't seem to care. He decides to walk towards the voices, but as he was getting closer the voices seemed to be getting further and further away. After 20 minutes he gave up and walked back. He got a radio call, and they said the other guy was found passed out covered in vomit and was being taken to the hospital. Then the radio died. Then the voices came back. Scared out of his mind, he decided to listen to what they were arguing about, picking up things like, "Well, it wasn't yours to take. I don't effing care, you knew better," and so on. His guess was 2 hunters arguing over a kill. Then he heard one shout something, then silence, then bang. A gunshot. He doused his fire and hid. After that he heard nothing, just his breathing for the next half hour until he saw ATV lights. He told the guy picking him up everything, and they called back. They had people looking for 3 hours and found nothing. They came back the next day with police and dogs. After about an hour a shallow grave was found, and in it was a long dead man who had clearly been shot in the face. The creepy thing was that it was a skeleton who had been there for years. So either the argument he heard just ended with a bang and both parties went home, or he heard the murder of someone from years ago.
Allison, are you at home?
Just got back. What's up?
Is your mother with you?
Yeah, we're just watching TV.
Do not say anything to her. Tell me exactly what she's doing.
She's just staring at the TV.
Is she bleeding?
Ew, yeah, her nose is bleeding a little. Oh gosh, her ear is bleeding too. Is she okay?
Allison, do exactly what I say. Go upstairs to my office.
Why?
Just do it. Open the top drawer in my desk.
WTF, Dad?
Pick up the gun and lock the door.
What the hell is going on? Is something wrong with Mom?
I don't know yet, but you need to stay in the office until I get home. I'll be there soon.
Why is Mom bleeding?
That's not important right now. Did you lock the door?
Not important? Why don't you tell me?
Allison, lock the door. Now!
Okay, I locked it.
Good. Do you have the gun? Allison? What's happening?
I hear Mom. She's coming upstairs. She's trying to open the door.
Don't let her in. She could be dangerous.
She's asking me to let her in.
Don't listen to her. You can't trust her right now.
OMG! She's pounding on the door and screaming. She says she's going to kill me. What do I do?
Do you have the gun?
Yes.
Take the safety off. Shoot her if she breaks in.
I can't shoot Mom.
Only if she breaks in.
I'm calling the police.
I just did. They're on their way. What is your mother doing?
She stopped pounding on the door.
Just stay where you are. Also, I know this sounds weird, but if you hear your mother humming a strange melody, cover your ears.
What? Why?
There's no time to explain. Just do it.
Not unless you tell me why.
Damn it, Allison. Okay, I'll tell you. This is going to sound crazy.
Babe, what are you looking at? Wait, what do you look? Oh my gosh. Do you not see that? Oh my gosh. Rewatch this video. Do you not see that right there? Oh my gosh.
So apparently this surveillance footage captured 2 crimes at once. The first crime being a kidnapping. The second is committed by this lady who spilled a gallon of organs or blood. Let me know what you think in the comments below.
This is why you have to be careful who you let into your Halloween parties. So this is a photo of who police believed was a guest at a Halloween party in Rochester, New York in the 1940s. The party was being thrown by Jack and Amelia Layton, and they actually noticed that this guest was outside of the party watching the guests through a window. The report claims that Amelia believed the guest was her friend Jan, who tended to go above and beyond for Halloween, creating very scary costumes. So she let this person in believing it was her friend Jan. But then 20 minutes later, Jan shows up, and that guest could not be found anywhere. So Amelia starts running around the party asking everyone if they knew who that guest was, and no one had recognized that person. So she goes into her daughter's room, who was playing while the party was happening. And the police report states that the only thing there left of Amelia's daughter was a bloody shoe. 4 other reports of this guest being at parties that night were called into police, and all of them resulted in missing children's cases. The identity of this person has never been found, and none of the kids have been found either.
I was heading south to visit some family members for a few weeks, and unfortunately, the only flight available included a 7-hour layover in Philadelphia. Not wanting to spend those hours huddled outside the airport, I rented the cheapest motel I could find and took the shuttle over about 11 p.m. The place was just about the shadiest looking motel I'd ever seen, but it was a bed, right? I checked in and headed to my room, 103. Exhausted, I immediately collapsed on the bed, a bit lumpy but not terrible. Not bothering to take my contacts out, I closed my eyes and let my thoughts wander. I was yanked back to reality by a loud grumbling from my stomach. Right, the airline hadn't fed us. Annoyed, I dug around in my bag for one of those microwavable soup cups, which I tossed in the room's microwave. As it rattled away, I noticed a piece of paper wedged underneath it. I yanked it out and unfolded it. There were 2 words scribbled on it hastily. Don't look. Whatever. I tossed it aside and retrieved my soup. Feeling lonely, I hopped online to see if anyone was on. I was in luck. My long-distance boyfriend happened to be on Skype. I called him up and we chatted a while, trying to keep our voices down. Eventually, though, he said something that made me laugh and I heard a muffled curse come from upstairs. Feeling guilty, I said my goodnights and ended the call with the intention of getting a bit of rest before my next flight. As I lay in the now dark room, I noticed a thin stream of light coming from where the curtain didn't close completely. Annoyed, I got up to close it. I was almost at the window when I heard it. I can see into your bedroom. The voice sent a chill up my spine. It was very quiet and high-pitched, like a child's. I can see into your bedroom.
Oh.
It was so soft, I wasn't sure I hadn't just imagined it. I shook my head and reached for the curtain. I know you can hear me. I'm at your bedroom window, and I know you can hear me. I jumped back as a shadow crossed the stream of light coming into my room. I definitely hadn't imagined it that time. There was a voice directly outside my door. Someone was out there looking in. I jumped back into bed and pulled the covers up to my chin. I'm at your bedroom window.
Oh.
I know you can hear me. I can see into your bedroom. Are you listening to me? I know you can hear me. Come, take a look. I'm at your bedroom window.
Oh no, that's giving me...
The taunting went on, rattling into my thoughts and leaving me paralysed in fear. Suddenly I heard the tenant upstairs moving around again. Footsteps stomped over to the door above and I heard muffled shouting. Hey, shut up down there. This isn't funny. I have work in 4 hours. The door upstairs slammed and there was silence. I breathed a sigh of relief and leant against the pillow, determined to get some sleep. I'm still out here.
Oh.
Come, look out your window. I sat straight up, heart pounding in my ears. The voice was back. It whispered on and on, repeating its mantra over and over again. I put my hands over my ears and rocked back and forth, trying to block out the sound. It was no use. The longer I sat there, the louder it got, until I could hear it so clearly, it sounded like it was right next to me. Frantic, I picked up the phone and dialed the police. Stammering and stuttering in fright, I managed to give them the information. Where I was, what was wrong, please help, I'm scared. I didn't care if it was a prank at this point, my mind was reeling in terror. The officers assured me they'd be over shortly to see what the issue was, and I thanked them and hung up the phone. As soon as I did, silence descended over the room. It wasn't just that the voice stopped. No. Utter silence filled the room. The air conditioner stopped. The street noises outside ceased. Even the faint hum of electricity from the TV and lights went away. It pressed on my ears with a tangible heaviness that sent shivers through me. Next to me, my phone rang. The caller ID told me that it was the police station calling me back. Cautiously, I picked it up and answered. Hello? I whispered. They aren't coming, growled the voice. And every light went out, plunging the room into complete and total darkness. In the dark, I fumbled for my bag. I might not have had a flashlight, but I did have my video camera, which had a weak light on. Besides, I can't deny I wanted to film this, if only to prove that I wasn't going insane. Finding it, I turned it on, casting a dim light over the room. Even with this light, the shadows still consumed the edges of my vision, making me jump at every perceived motion I caught in the corner of my eye. Shaking, I forced myself to focus on the camera. Carefully, I stood up from my bed and walked towards where I thought the curtain was. The thin light from the camera only served to give a vague outline of the curtain and door, as though the darkness that had swallowed the room was even now working against the light from my camera. Carefully, I reached out and touched the curtain, pushing it closed all the way. Whatever was out there couldn't look in now. As I did, I heard a loud clicking sound next to me, like a latch turning in the door. Panicked, I whipped around to look at the door. Inexplicably, it had opened on its own. The latching sound I heard, however, was the door getting caught by the extra security lock. I could see nothing through the crack, just more inky blackness outside. I slammed the door shut again, double-checking the locks and latches. Everything was in place. I breathed a sigh of relief. That's when I heard it. A sort of scuttling sound coming from the back of my room. Somewhere in the direction of the bathroom.
No!
Cautiously, I moved slowly towards the noise, trying to keep my hands from shaking too badly. I knew whatever footage I got was going to be a mess of wobbly camera, but my videographer skills weren't exactly my top priority at the moment.
Yeah.
I approached the source of the noise, but found nothing there. Except for another piece of paper, wedged partly behind a wall-length mirror next to the closet. I fumbled to open the folded-up scrap, trying not to tear it in my haste. When I finally got it open, there were only 2 words. Turn around.
My friends and I live in a very nice area. Try and picture the quintessential suburban neighborhood. It's relatively quiet, and people are used to the secluded, isolated feel it provides. The last place you'd expect anything dangerous to really happen. With the exception of what I'm about to tell you, my town radiated the calming silence you'd eventually come to crave. This happened a few summers ago, and as much as I try to resist it, I will never be able to erase the memory from my mind. Anyway, my friend Chaz and I had always been those kids to try to cause trouble wherever we could. Looking back, I struggled to justify our behavior. I guess it was our teenage manifestation of a rebellious spirit or some shit like that. We lived on the same street and hung out after school every single day. Because our neighborhood consisted of nothing but very large houses and towering trees, we didn't usually have much to do on weekdays, unless we wanted to journey a few towns over. So we ended up making our own fun most of the time. In our neighborhood, there was a well-known mansion at the top of a hill that had been abandoned for as long as people could remember. It wasn't really special. Every kid who lived in my town had been inside. The rooms were essentially stripped of anything of value, and finding a wall that wasn't coated with multiple layers of spray paint was almost impossible. It was especially creepy because it stood at the edge of a massive cemetery. For Chaz and I, this cemetery mansion was a kind of default, a plan B if we will. If we had nothing else to do, we'd throw some graffiti up inside or just smoke and chill on the roof. This was one of those nights. It was like 3 a.m. on a Wednesday, and Chaz and I had just been flaked on by a couple girls that we made plans with. The two of us were kind of upset, so we figured chucking rocks at the cemetery mansion would be a decent way to release some energy. Had we been sober, we might have been more cautious about doing something so stupid. But it was late, it was summer, and we didn't care. I convinced Chaz not to drive. We were more than a little drunk. And after about a 20-minute walk, we crested the hill and were met with a familiar yet eerie sight. Vines twisting and hanging down the muddied bricks, most of the windows shattered, menacing points at the tip of the roof. Definitely a sinister feel, especially at such an ungodly hour of the night. Without warning, Chaz picked up a stone and chucked it towards the house. It sailed gracefully before smashing through one of the fourth-floor windows. It was difficult to confirm in the low light of the moon and surrounding streetlights, but the deafening sound of the shattering glass confirmed it. Gleefully, I picked up a rock and did the same, puncturing one of the second-floor windows. Before the mansion's fourth floor, there was a single small window, probably an attic, that stood lonely as the highest room in the house. Chaz challenged me to hit it. I missed a good 10 throws before giving up with an aggravated sigh. Chaz grinned, picked up a rock, and said, "Watch this." He took a long look at the tiny target and launched it. I watched in awe as the rock flew through the air, shattering the attic window with a satisfying crash. I was shocked. The two of us stood there for a second, admiring what just happened. Chaz was about to pick up another rock, when I, still looking at the shattered window, saw a dark object fly out of the emptiness and sail down towards us. I literally jumped, confused as to what I just saw. Chaz and I looked down at the rock that had just landed on the gravel in front of us, the exact same rock Chaz had just thrown. It was easily recognizable, as it had a sort of Z imprint on one of the faces. The two of us stood there in silence, obviously a little shaken up. It was really late for other kids to be doing the same thing we were, but that was the only explanation we could come up with. We agreed that it must have been a group of teenagers trying to mess with us, an idea that actually excited us. The devious grins on our faces told the story. We were going to try and get the jump on them before they could scare us. The two of us quietly made our way to the front door, ducking under a thick vine that hung from the towering pillars above. The door was slightly ajar, but it always was. It had long since been misaligned from its hinges and didn't close properly. As quietly as we could, we stepped inside, our eyes adjusting to the minimal light and our noses to the smell of mildew and rotting wood. We slowly made our way up the creaky stairs, unable to silence the sound of shifting wood beneath our feet. We had made it to the fourth floor, and were positioned at the base of the final staircase. Interestingly, we had never been up there. The entrance to the roof was on the opposite side of the house, and this room must have eluded us. Chaz took the lead, and I followed directly behind. The staircase led to a small wooden door, which we presumed was the attic door. Chaz put a hand on the doorknob, and even looked back at me. I nodded, and in one fluid motion, he flung the door open. Before I could even see anything, I was struck by the smell that made me take a few reactionary steps backward. It was disgusting. It smelled like death and rot. Something was clearly decaying in that room. Chaz covered his nose and entered. I was a little more hesitant to do so, but I decided that I'd rather be by his side than alone on a pitch-black staircase. The sight was even worse than the smell. We found ourselves staring at a tiny room, the floor of which a white pentagram was painted. There were a few unlit candles and a closet door that we didn't open. The smell seemed to be emanating from that closet, and I was worried Chaz would want to investigate more. To our surprise, the room was void of people. I had enough though. This was really starting to freak me out, and I couldn't fight the urge to leave any longer. I turned towards the door, and that's when I saw it. I looked down the staircase and saw two cloaked figures looking back up at me. I cursed and ran towards Chaz. Just then, we heard stomping up the stairs from behind us. We were screwed. As the stomping got closer to the door, I was prepared to fend off whoever it was, bracing myself for a fight. Just then, Chaz yelled at me, "Dude, come on." I whipped around to see Chaz halfway out of the shattered window, presumably stepping on the roof. I hurriedly did the same, and the second I made it onto the roof, I heard the door forcefully open. We ran across the roof to the entrance we knew about, not wanting to wait to see if we were being followed. Had the situation not been so dire, I don't know if I would have been able to go through with our plan. The darkness made it nearly impossible to see. One wrong step and we would have been sent tumbling to our deaths. I followed close behind Chaz, and we made it to the roof entrance. It was a little hatch that led to a ladder. Chaz failed to open the hatch up. It was locked from the inside. Just then, we heard a booming voice ring out from somewhere in the distance. "They went that way," yelled a freakishly deep voice. To this day, it was the scariest thing I've ever heard anyone say. Without thinking, I stomped on the hatch as hard as I could with my right foot, and it gave way and it crashed loud enough to reveal our position to anyone in the house, let alone someone chasing us on the roof. The force of the impact caused me to fall into the hole, and had it not been for my hands reflexively grabbing the ladder, I wouldn't have been seriously hurt. Chaz screamed at me to go, so I climbed down as fast as I could, trying to ignore the pain in my leg. The two of us sprinted down the other staircase and burst out the back door, jumping the fence and running into the cemetery. Chaz seemed to be fine. He was literally laughing. I, on the other hand, was so scared I could barely think. I never thought squatting behind a gravestone in a cemetery could be so comforting. Chaz and I maintained a watchful eye on the mansion, half expecting someone to be following us. We waited, and just when we thought the coast was clear, we saw a group of 4 or 5 cloaked figures circling the property, frantically searching under bushes and trees. The two of us crept closer into the cemetery, until we were sure there was no chance we could be spotted in the darkness. We hopped the backside fence, and haven't been back to that house since. I can only assume that we stumbled upon some kind of cult meeting or ritual. Why they decided to do it in an abandoned house is something I still ask myself.
This is the longest true horrifying story episode. This episode is worth the time. The story took place in Nador, Morocco in the year 2015. The story was submitted by Ilyas. Back in 2015, Ilyas was an 18-year-old Moroccan Muslim that lived in Norway. One night, Ilyas was back in Morocco visiting family, and he stayed up late watching a movie at home till 3 in the morning. The living room was very warm, so he got up to open the window for fresh air. As he was at the window, being at the 4th floor in that building, he looks down, and the street was dark and empty, but there was one man wearing black from head to toe with a hood covering his face. He wasn't sure why that man was outside at that time. He looked away, but then peeked one last time out of curiosity. When he looked at him again, the man had his hands on a building's wall. He was strangely just feeling the wall, and out of nowhere, the man vanishes through that wall. He rubbed his eyes in disbelief after what he just witnessed. Ilyas swears that there was no door in that spot. It was just physically impossible. He forgets about this after a while, and then flies back to Norway. 6 months later, in Norway, Ilyas experiences his first ever sleep paralysis, which in Islam is known as Jathum. He vividly remembers having a conversation with a dark figure, and his mom also witnessed him speak in his sleep. He woke up after the paralysis with swollen feet and rashes all over his body. They rushed to the ER, and none of the doctors could diagnose what caused his body to react that way. He was finally discharged after treatment, but after that day, Ilyas was never the same person. He always acted differently. He was antisocial. He was distant from people. And his mom always told him that he needed ruqya. A few months later, they fly back to Morocco for the next holiday season. He was always against his mother's ruqya idea. However, he decided to fight his thoughts and do it. He had a cousin that was also suffering, and she visited a raqi in Morocco quite regularly. So they went together with both of their moms. When they reached, they sat down and waited for their session. Ilyas could hear the raqi in the other room, and he felt extremely uneasy and started to sweat. The Quran recitation, the ruqya, the sounds, made him not even want to look at that direction. He was angry. He went outside for a moment to gain back his senses until their turn finally reached. The raqi called them in and started. Ilyas's cousin immediately started reacting horribly when the Quran started. She was screaming so loud. Ilyas started losing senses throughout his entire body. He was sweating, he was unable to move, and he was shouting from fear. He does pray, and he does read Quran, but he was so confused as to why he was screaming. He felt like he was being tortured. The slightest pinch from the raqi felt like it was a knife stab. It was very powerful, and this is where he felt a jinn's presence inside of him. The following night was the most horrific night for Ilyas. For a whole week, the man was not able to sleep alone, and he would get mentally abused by these demons haunting him. Weeks go by. Ilyas started getting demonic thoughts of harming his own family. He hated everyone. When he would look at his own sister, her face would seem distorted to him. He knows these beings are playing with his head. His whole life turned upside down. He would regularly think of harming his own family, but luckily, he never did. A few months later, Ilyas was back in Norway and life was back to normal. He was relieved that he was in a good state of mind and that the horror was over. At the time, he worked at a local grocery store. After a Christmas celebration at work, which he did not participate in, it was late at night. He was walking one of his colleagues back home from work. She was a young woman and she was scared to walk alone. After they reached outside her place, she asked him, "Where's that other girl that was with us?" "What girl?" Ilyas asked. "There was no one there. It was just you and I." She swore that there was another woman with black hair, pale skin, standing next to him the whole time, staring at Ilyas's colleague with anger. Even though this entity gave Ilyas a break, this jinn was still around, haunting everyone that has intentions towards Ilyas.